So if you're going mechanised infantry, which is the stronger of the two, the Chimera or the Taurox? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Today we're back for another Imperial Guard unit comparison, and we're looking at the mechanised infantry forces of the Guard world, and namely our two choices for ground-based APCs at the moment. Mechanised infantry isn't the strongest build that we have in this edition, I feel, but who knows, maybe that might change in 9th, particularly with the rules of tanks being able to shoot while in combat. Now, the Chimera and the Taurox really are two sides of the same coin. They've got very similar defensive profiles, points costs, middling damage output, and can both make use of certain strategies, such as the Emperor's Blade Assault Company, for example. In this video we're going to compare their relative damage outputs against a range of targets, see how tough they are versus a range of weapons, and then talk about the important external factors that might let you choose one over the other. Let's jump straight into it then, and take a look at their damage output. So for the purposes of this comparison, we've just looked at the base Taurox with autocannons, the Chimera with multi-laser and heavy bolter, and the Chimera with multi-laser heavy bolter that's also got something inside it, so it's able to fire with its twin lasgun arrays. For those that aren't aware, if you have a unit inside a Chimera, then it can open fire with essentially 6 lasguns mounted on the side in addition to all of its main weapons. And for this comparison we've assumed that they're at 24-inch range, though obviously this gets far better if the Chimera is up close. I typically field these guys with storm bolters or heavy stubbers on top as well, but for this comparison I have left them off, just for ease of calculation and the fact that they'd add similar benefits to both of them. And the numbers in this chart represent the amount of wounds inflicted on an enemy unit by either one Taurox or one Chimera. It's not weighted for points, and I've assumed the vehicles to be stationary or using the Talon doctrine to fire on the move. I know in reality a lot of the time they're going to be moving around, but that would just lead to the same numbers being a bit lower. So first of all, unsurprisingly against standard guardsmen, the Chimera wins out a bit. More shots from the multi-laser and heavy bolter just chew through guard that bit more efficiently than twin autocannons. And this really goes to the next level entirely if you're going to factor lasguns into the equation, when the Chimera is killing on average about 3 per turn, or it might be almost 4 a turn if they're within 12-inch range. The Chimera also wins out against 1-wound heavy infantry such as TAC Marines, Assisters of Battle, or things like Orc Boys, anywhere where the autocannon damage output doesn't come into effect. It's only mildly better in its base damage output, but when you factor in lasguns, if they can be activated, then it becomes much better. Against heavier infantry, such as intercessors and aggressors, the Taurox does do better, but only by a little bit if you compare it to the Chimera variant with the lasguns, and they actually have the same damage output versus aggressors, due to the fact that the Taurox autocannon 2 damage doesn't fit very well into 3-wound models. The Taurox does cost 70 points where the Chimera costs 73 in this scenario though, so that will be a bit of a tiebreaker, meaning that it just noses slightly ahead when targeting things like aggressors and intercessors. Against Toughness 7 or Toughness 6 vehicles, the Taurox autocannons really come into their prime and far outshine the Chimera, though things get a little bit more even again when you're targeting things like Lehman Russes or Toughness 8 armour, just due to the Chimera's guns being exactly the same damage output against these targets, whereas Toughness 8 really messing up those autocannons, so the Taurox is only very slightly ahead of the Chimera when firing lasguns. So damage output, even though it's fairly meagre on these transport vehicles, is pretty much what you'd expect. The Taurox is very slightly better against anything with 2 wounds or more, and really comes into its own against Toughness 6 and 7 vehicles. The Chimera puts up a reasonable showing against all targets, but is only really efficient when you're targeting light infantry such as guardsmen. In terms of durability, this table is weighted for points, and it basically shows the number of hits needed to kill either a Taurox that's 72 points or a Chimera that's 75 points, and it is weighted, meaning that the Taurox will win if it's a draw basically. The only difference in their defensive profiles is that the Chimera has Toughness 7 and the Taurox has Toughness 6, otherwise they're exactly the same in terms of save and number of wounds. This gives the output that you'd expect. Toughness 6 and 7 matters against only a few things, such as grenade launchers or autocannons, but when it does matter, it has the potential to matter quite a lot, with for example 20 grenade launcher hits needed to take down a Taurox, but 30 needed to take down a Chimera. Otherwise, against dedicated anti-tanks such as lascannons and missile launchers, or really light weapons such as lasguns or bolt rifles, the two have exactly the same durability, so the Taurox wins slightly because it costs less than the Chimera. To be honest though, this slight points disparity is a really minor advantage. I would give the durability contest win solidly to the Chimera, because it's basically as good as the Taurox in most circumstances, and decently better against Strength 6 and Strength 7. So from those tables, I'd conclude that The Chimera generally wins defense and anti-infantry firepower point for point, and the Taurox wins on anti-tank fire. So let's mention a few of the other things that might persuade you to take one over the other. First of all, for the Chimera, one advantage for those lasguns is that they don't suffer the heavy weapon movement penalty if you're using a regiment that isn't Talon or you're not staying still. Again, of course, they're pretty much mainly effective against light infantry and will only do some very chip damage to anything else, but remaining hitting on 4s even as you move around is certainly no bad thing. Secondly, and perhaps one of the most important factors on this whole list, is that the Chimera comes with a very helpful transport capacity of 12. The Taurox is just limited to 10, and this really is a significant disadvantage. Having transport capacity 12 means that you can put an infantry or veteran squad in, and also have some support characters, say an officer to order them, maybe an astropath to give them ignores cover and deal some damage with psychic maelstrom or something. It also leaves you the opportunity to use, say, 2 special weapon squads, each with 3 plasma guns in. You could have 90 points worth of guard arm with plasma hiding in the Chimera to jump out and fry the enemy. Similarly with command squads, you could have 3 of them in there, potentially armed to the teeth with special weapons, or you could perhaps fit 4 Bulgur in there should you want to. It's really just a nice flexibility advantage that allows you to run more interesting things in there rather than say just one 10-man infantry squad. The Chimera also has the advantage of smoke launchers, which the Taurox unfortunately doesn't, and these are a great option to have. They can be far more useful than firing your weapons in some scenarios, particularly if you don't have any light infantry targets to take down. You could basically have your entire Chimera formation be -1 to hit for a turn if you'd rather have that than have their firepower. They can even be a decent option if you're just bracketed at the end of the game. You've only got a few wounds left, their damage output's going to be meaningless, and you literally just want them to survive one more turn on an objective or something. Smoke launchers really are a solid upgrade, and one that you only have to use if it's going to make sense to, so they're just a solid extra benefit to taking a Chimera. You also have some additional options on the Chimera, where the Taurox doesn't have any. My favourite loadouts are either the multi-laser and heavy bolter, or double heavy bolter, one on the turret, one on the hull. But you do also have the opportunity to take heavy flamers, should that be something that you want to do. I don't feel they're quite as strong on the Chimera at the moment, but there is something to be said for reliable up-close damage output, particularly if you're going to be throwing your Chimera straight into the enemy ranks. You can also take a hunter-killer missile. Generally I think that's again a bit of a niche type thing, but it might be good if you're Cadian and you're sitting around in your own deployment zone for a turn or so. You could potentially get quite a lot of hunter-killers on the go across the course of an army. You do also have the option for the vehicle equipment list, things like the auger array, dozer blade, and track guards. In general I prefer not to use any of these, but I could potentially see the track guards being a helpful item to include to stop it getting bracketed and getting slowed down that way. But at 10 points you are paying a bit of a premium for it on a very cheap vehicle. The Chimera has 2 stratagems of its own, including mobile command vehicle, allowing you to issue orders within it. I don't think it's the best, to be honest. I'd rather just get out my commander and save the command points. And head first, the curious one from the Psychic Awakening update that gives you +2 to charge if you charge out of a Chimera. I guess the extra distance could be handy at some point, but I'd argue that for the majority of our units it's not going to be overly helpful, worth sacrificing a command point for anyway. Finally, in terms of real-world modelling, Chimeras have been around for a long time, they're very easy to find second-hand, and at time of recording, they are slightly cheaper at £25 rather than £30 of the Taurox, though this week they are being increased to £30, which is the same price that the Taurox is. If you're watching this in the first couple of days after this coming out, and you were absolutely set that you were going to get a Chimera sometime, bear in mind that they are rising in cost in a few days' time. Finally, model looks are always subjective, as I know, but just anecdotally I've heard a lot more people say good things about the Chimera than the Taurox. I'm personally not the biggest fan of those weird track units on the Taurox myself. I think if they'd just given it wheels then it would have looked far better. Plus the autocannons are mounted in a bit of a weird way, but I have seen people do some interesting conversions by mounting them on a turret mounted weapon, which looks far better in my opinion. If we move over to the benefits for the Taurox now, as we've already said, it has slightly better anti-tank point for point, and it's very slightly cheaper as well, meaning that you can get a transport for 70 points rather than the at least 73 that the Chimera will be paying. We didn't mention range when we talked about the shooting of its guns, but 48-inch range means that it's going to be hitting what it wants with those autocannons, so it can engage things at the back of the enemy's battle line if it needs to. It also has a slight movement advantage, never a bad thing for a transport vehicle. It can go 14 inches where the Chimera goes 12. Frankly, it's not the biggest difference in the world, but a little bit of extra help with positioning never goes amiss. Again, in terms of stratagems, it did gain one from the Greater Good Psychic Awakening book, although honestly I wouldn't be very tempted to use it, besides in specific circumstances. Rolling Death is 1 command point to give your Taurox +1 to its hit rolls if it moved half its movement speed or less. The reason it's kind of rubbish, this one, is because you're only buffing the damage output of 2 autocannons in your army for a whole command point, meaning that for your 1 command point investment, your Taurox will do on average around about a third row wound more to vehicles than it would have done anyway. We've got several ways of converting stratagems into damage output in the guard now, such as the Emperor's Wrath Artillery Company formation, or things like having your battle cannon fire max shots for 2 command points against vehicles. Honestly, it's sadly one of the weakest stratagems in the book for doing that, so unless you need absolutely every iota of damage output out of your Taurox, I just wouldn't bother with this one. Finally, in terms of real-world cost benefits, the Taurox does have the advantage of appearing in the Start Collecting Militarum Tempestus Scions box, which both means that you could get it as part of one of those if you were going to pick some Scions up, and it also means that plenty of new kits tend to be going on second-hand sites such as eBay for a cheaper price than Games Workshop will typically sell them. After the price rises come into effect on the 1st of June 2020, at least at time of recording, the Taurox is going to be the one that's going to be easiest to acquire in terms of paying less for it if you want to go down one of these options. So for my personal opinion, I'm going to say that my favourite out of the two is most definitely the Chimera. It just has numerous extra advantages that outweigh the Taurox in my opinion. Defense is really the main thing that you're wanting for a transport vehicle, and it has better defense against certain weapons. Those lasgun arrays I think make it the stronger shooter as well, provided you have something inside it, and transport capacity 12 and smoke launchers just add icing to the cake. And I think that they outweigh the Taurox's relatively slightly better anti-tank firepower at longer range, and the slightly greater movement. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, as to whether you prefer one or the other in 8th edition. It'd be good to hear your guys' takes on the matter. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics for more guard content coming out all the time. And if you've been enjoying the videos, I'd just like to mention the Element Games affiliate link that I have down in the description below. If you live in the UK and were thinking about picking up any miniatures, such as Chimeras or anything else, then if you give that link a click and order through Element, then you get their usual 15% discount on Warhammer 40k items, and a small amount of the money goes to support Auspex Tactics, so it can be one good way to help out the channel. And if you live in the USA or Canada, there's also an Amazon link down there as well, which does pretty much the same thing. There won't typically be as many discounts on Warhammer 40k items, but basically any purchases made after clicking that link go to help out Auspex Tactics a little bit, whether that's model soldiers or anything else on Amazon. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.